I've developed some really unusual habits doing all the live streams over the last year. So it's always like, hi, everybody. Hi, we're live. Oh, my goodness. Wow. Hi, everybody. It was a dark and stormy night. Hey, Chuck, how's it going? Helen's here. Ghislaine. Hey, everybody. This is going to be great. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We will get started in just a moment. You can see it's Beth from AutoCrit, and I have with me Ally Machate of the Writer's Ally. Today we're going to talk about transitioning over to editing as we are entering week 2 of our community writing challenge. Even if you're not doing the challenge, Ally is always such a great partner for us, always such a great guest to have on our shows. So anything that you learn from Ally today is going to apply to all the works that you're doing.
Very true.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Toronto is here. Charlotte is here. A big Monday. Hello. Hey, Amy. I'm so glad you reminded me it's Monday. I'm like, what? When we live stream every day, I get a little confused, right? Because normally we live stream on Tuesdays, 1 o'clock for our traditional AutoCrit Live. And today it's Monday. We're here with a special guest. So, Ally, I thought that was a pillow in your background, but I think it just moved. Now,
it did.
Okay, what's going on?
Yes, it's my buddy Magellan. He's taking a nap behind me here on the desk.
The assistant, hard at work.
Very hard at work. Yes, he is dreaming up many tasks for me right now, I'm sure.
Yes, I know that he is. My office assistant is currently taking a break. My personal assistant, as Stephanie says.
Oh, I like that, personal assistant. That's fun.
Oh my goodness. Bruce says, does this mean I'm supposed to have my story like actually written?
Oh gosh,
no worries. No. The one thing
great job,
we had live streams every day last week, and we were getting updates from all our challenge participants. Oh, how many words have you gotten so far? And the range is all over the place. Everyone work at your own pace. The submissions will be due starting on the 20th. Will be due on the 24th. We'll open for submissions on the 24th. But up until then, your balance of writing versus editing may vary. But for those who are ready to make that mental transition over to editing, if you've gotten that first draft down, then we'll kick that off with Ally today with some terrific tips on how to do that successfully, how to change your two hats. Oh, look at Stephen. Oh, look. Ally, look. Two of my most trusted. Stephen, thank you.
That's super nice. Thank you.
That is super nice. Oh, great. So let's do a quick question to kind of warm us up. And then we'll dive into the official content today. I love Bruce's question in the chat because, as you know, we always say, like, how do you get better at writing? Writing, and reading. So great question, Ally. And Ally, as an editor, I know you read a lot. And as a writer, you probably also read a lot. How many hours a day do you actually devote to reading? Good question.
That's a great question. It's a really great question. So first of all, let's say I'm not going to count how many hours I devote to reading related to work, right?
That's fair.
Right. Any measure of writing or reading related to work is completely skewed and not necessarily related to productive reading, right? Because when you're reading for work purposes, it's not the same as when you're reading, let's say, sort of for research or inspirational purposes, right? Or that kind of osmosis that happens when you read a lot of good stuff in the category that you want to write in. So I don't actually read every single day. Some days I'll read almost all day, and then other days I won't read as much. I feel pretty safe saying it probably averages to 1 to 2 hours a day at least. But I sort of batch my time a little bit differently. But I do read very regularly. And actually, if you guys are on Goodreads, You can find me. My name, Ally Machate. You can look me up, and I'd love to be friends with you there. I'm pretty active as far as keeping up my reading list and updates on what I'm reading and reviews. I'm not a professional reviewer. My reviews are all very much, I consider it to be a very personal platform. Like, I liked this book because of these reasons, or I thought it could have been better because of these reasons. But yeah, if you're interested in what I'm reading, feel free to check me out there.
What a great idea. I would love to follow you on Goodreads. And I love the idea that you separated reading for work and reading for research or entertainment or personal improvement or whatever it is. I find that I read differently when I'm studying a book, right? Whether it's for personal growth or to understand that author's habits and patterns, or to, what does a good hook look like? Let's dissect this book. So the time spent reading can be kind of categorized in so many different ways. And 1 to 2 hours a day is still amazing. Your mileage out there in our viewership may vary, but I love the idea of reading as much as you can, whatever you can. I remember, as a kid, reading cereal boxes or just whatever I could get my hands on. The Happy Meal boxes. I've read everything I can get my hands on since childhood. So, yeah, Larry says I find I don't read as much when I spend all day writing. Same. Sometimes I need to give my brain a little bit of a break, or I'll switch to something that's lighthearted and entertaining. A very chick lit kind of. I call it mental junk food, and I don't mean that to be offensive. But like mental Oreos, you just need something to entertain your brain if you've been writing all day or editing all day. So,
yeah, Beth, I'm hearing the same thing with your volume. You got kind of like a weird. You're not gone, but something definitely changed.
How about now?
No. While you're figuring that out, I'll just pick up on that thread. If you do follow me on Goodreads, you will see I usually have at least 3 books going at any given time. So I'll usually have a book of short works, like short stories or essays or articles, something I don't have to read cover to cover, that I can just read a short bit whenever I need to. I'll usually have at least one more serious kind of nonfiction, maybe a business book or something I call human studies. I like that kind of nonfiction, and then a novel. So I'm often rotating exactly what you said, Beth, depending on how you feel, where your brain's at.
And honestly, is my audio back? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, there we go. We'll try this for a while. Hopefully, we always say it wouldn't be a live stream if something didn't go wrong. So maybe we got that out of the way early. I also rotate depending on what book is in the room I'm in. Honestly.
That's fair.
If I have something in the office versus in my bedroom versus in the living room, then I'm just going to pick up whatever's nearby and start reading it. So yeah. Awesome. Well, let's see if we can. Okay. So I think Garrett says I just shifted to another dimension live on air. I think I'm back in the present time. Let's jump in. So, Ally, I know for me, you're a guest who needs no introduction, but for those of us watching live or watching this replay, tell us a little bit about you and the Writer's Ally.
Yeah, totally. I am the principal of the Writer's Ally. We are a team of publishing professionals, editors, designers, etc. And we provide author services, basically. So we help folks to write, publish, and sell more books. And I've been in book publishing for over 20 years. I started off at a very small regional publisher in upstate New York, and then was incredibly fortunate to get a job at Simon & Schuster, one of the big 5 publishers in New York City, where I really learned the business and was put through my paces and did basically an apprenticeship, which is how book publishing works, and acquired books, edited books, learned all the things, and then eventually all the things, and eventually then went freelance and independent. I've been a nationally best-selling ghostwriter. I've been a book doctor to major publishers and agents. I've been a freelance editor. I am a writer, just like all of you, though my professional credits on the fiction side certainly do not run in the way that my nonfiction does. But books are absolutely my love. I've been reading since I was 3. Words, books, all of that is just where my passion is at, and I am so grateful to be here with all of you today.
Terrific. Thanks, Ally. So as we mentioned, this is the start of week 2 of our 2-week community writing challenge, where all of our participants have picked a topic, started a short story with the goal, the very ambitious goal of having it completely written and edited and completed by the 24th, which is 14 days. So here we're kicking off week 2. I'm going to hand it over to Ally and let her run with it.
Cool. All right. So I'm very excited to be here with you. We're at a really great midpoint. Somebody asked earlier if we were expected to have your story written already. You may or may not. If you do, kudos. You might be a little ahead of the game. If not, we're winding down to the end of the challenge. So as we're getting near the end, if you haven't started revising yet or starting to pull your bits and pieces of your story together, you're going to want to shift gears to that soon for the purposes of the challenge in any case. And as you make that shift, I'm here today to offer you some helpful tips. So I always like to start any talk about writing and especially about revising with a little bit of a focus on mindset and sort of general preparation. So first, let's just acknowledge that this is a crazy experience. Right? The pressure is on. And that's one of the awesome things about a challenge. You have a limited period of time, 14 days to, start, finish, revise, and then submit this story for the contest for possible publication in the anthology and a variety of other prizes. Many of you are trying to write in the short form for the first time. You all have a very, very short amount of time to write that complete story and edit it enough to compete for publication in the anthology. Most of you probably have a pretty messy draft right about now. And it might even be so messy that it doesn't even feel like a story yet, right? It might just feel like a bunch of haphazard notes on a page or, proverbial page, as you would. So I just want to reassure you, this is how it is for all writers, you guys, all writers. Don't let the gap between where you are and where you want to be intimidate you. All right. Every best-selling writer in the world was once exactly where you are right now. And that is with a super mess of words on the page, right? If you are looking at a super mess of words and feeling frustrated, just know that is where we all start, everybody. So that's first. Second of all, pat yourself on the back for taking a risk, right? Trying something new and hard. If you don't like the story that you write during this challenge, nobody ever has to see it, right? This is for you. But you might surprise yourself. You might find that what you create isn't all that bad, or maybe there's parts of it that you actually really, really like a lot, right? So, kudos to you. Give yourself the credit that you deserve for stretching your comfort zone a little bit, trying something on. And third and finally, I want to invite you to try and make this revising and editing part of the process fun. A lot of writers, especially new writers, they sort of think of the creation part as the fun part and then the polishing or the revising part as the chore. And I want to invite you to just approach this part of the process with a sense of curiosity and play. So what you have on the page, wherever stage you're at, those are your raw materials, right? It's actually not your story. It's just the materials that will become your story. So now it's time to see what shapes those various bits and pieces, those materials, can take. And I really like to think of the revision stage as solving a puzzle. So like figuring out how those pieces can work together in the best way, or what pieces are missing that you might need to add, or what pieces are there that you might want to get rid of to ultimately, make everything fit together and work in a harmonious fashion. And when you use a tool like AutoCrit, which you're going to see a demo for tomorrow, and Beth will tell you a little bit more about that in a bit. Thursday. Oh, sorry, not tomorrow. Thursday. My apologies.
I don't know what day it is, but
today is Monday. So AutoCrit is awesome because it actually can make this particularly, this whole part of the revision process feel a lot more tactile, like you are in fact playing with your draft. It's one of the things I really like about the tool. And as we all know, we're more likely to do something if it's fun, right? So anything that helps make revisions feel more fun is a good thing. So I hope you definitely get that demo on your calendar. Beth will give you more details again later, and make sure you show up for that. So that's like the mindset, sort of getting your head on straight type stuff. Let's talk now a little bit about some practical aspects of revising your short story so that you can really finish strong in this challenge. So I want to begin by saying that if it's at all possible, and it might not be, you guys are all working at different schedules, different challenges, what have you. If it's at all possible, given the short time frame that we have for this challenge, try to build in a little distance for yourself, right? I mean, a little distance between finishing your draft and then starting your revisions. Even one day will give you much fresher eyes and a little much needed objectivity before you dive back in. And then I really want to encourage you to begin by sitting down in your writing space, whatever that is for you. Carve out some quiet time. It's really hard to do any kind of effective revisions if you're being distracted every 5 minutes, right? So if you got to go for a walk, go to a cafe. If you have to leave the house, a lot of us can do that now, thankfully, depending on where you live and your vaccination status. But whatever it is, give yourself some time and just start by reading what you have from start to finish. Like, no judgment. Just read through it, review where you're at. Don't edit anything yet. Resist the urge to make tweaks as you go. This is just about getting the lay of the land, so to speak. See what's there. See what still resonates for you. Now, as you go, make notes. So if an idea occurs to you as you're rereading, definitely make notes. If there's something you see that you're like, reading it, that's so great. I can't even believe I just wrote that. I love that. Make a note that that's something you definitely want to keep. Maybe you read a bit that you realize now doesn't make sense. Maybe your story started to go in a different direction than you thought when you started, and you think, oh, I can lose this whole section. You can make those kinds of notes. But I don't want you to really get into fiddling too much right now. Just the obvious stuff. Mostly what you're doing with this read through is assessing your needs and next steps. So once you do that, if you're not a planner, if you're what we call a pantser, thanks to NaNoWriMo lingo,
This one's going to be controversial. Get ready.
If you did not write to an outline, if you started by just diving in and you didn't have an outline, now is the time to make one. So many of us hear this word outline and we immediately start getting the sweats, right? Because we start thinking back to grade school, where we were taught to make these outlines that were super rigid, like Roman numerals, point by point kind of nonsense. I'm not talking about that kind of outline. Although if that works for you, that's great, that's fine. But it doesn't have to be like that. When I say the word outline, what I'm really talking about is something that's going to serve as a roadmap for you, that's going to reveal what is actually happening in the draft. So for example, what are your scenes? What are the major moments of your story? The emotional moments, the action beats, the plot beats, right? When does the climax happen? At what point is that? What actually is the climax? How are things going to wrap up? So a roadmap of what you have in your draft is a really great way to get your bearings, and it will help you to see what might be missing, like where the gaps in your plot structure and your character development in particular might be. Now, if you did write to an outline, now is also a good time for you to revisit that outline and just make sure it still reflects what you actually wrote, right? As we write, oftentimes new things arise. Creativity can create surprises, or you might have just changed your mind mid-story, whatever. So if you already have an outline, go ahead and look at it, adjust that roadmap so that it now reflects what is actually on the page and what it is you're actually trying to do. So either way, you want to have some kind of document that just maps out what is happening, the major beats of your story, so that you can get that sort of bird's eye view of what's happening.
Now, I have to say, Ally, I know as a diehard pantser, I thought the first time I heard you give this advice, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I was a little skeptical. I did this, right? I let my work rest. I came back and read it with just call outs, like what is this? Kind of call outs, because I can't resist. But I made that little outline, and I didn't do the Roman numerals and the I just did like stickies, basically. Just a roadmap, right? So maybe for me, the outline idea was too rigid, but the roadmap idea really worked for me. And it gave me such a view of, okay, right? This is in the wrong wrong spot. This is okay over here, but I need to move this part. Just getting the big rocks out there, so then you can fill in the pebbles and the sand and the water to really round out your story. So for anyone who, like I was, is feeling a little skeptical about this advice, definitely give it a try. It's very, very, very helpful. So,
oh my God, that's great feedback. Thank you, Beth. I'm so glad that you gave that a try and it worked for you.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and like, I mean, big rocks, that's a great metaphor to think of it in terms of the big rocks, absolutely. Another way to think of it, what I usually say is that your plot is kind of like the skeleton, right? It's the bones of your story. And what you're going to hang on the bones will flesh out the book. So your scenes, your characters, description, and so on. And when you have a raw draft, especially if you wrote it super fast because you're in a challenge, it can sometimes be hard to see that skeleton amidst all the little bits and pieces. So creating that outline, again, whatever way works for you. Stickies on a wall can be totally fine. It doesn't even have to be a document per se, right? The whole point is just to have that roadmap, that skeleton, so that you can see that important structure very clearly and make those choices about when things happen, where they happen, what else needs to happen, that kind of stuff. So once you're clear on that frame or skeleton, and you've dealt with any big picture issues that immediately popped out to you relating to the plot. So for example, if you laid everything out and you realized, oh, I don't actually have an inciting incident.
The knee bone is not connected to the shin bone or whatever.
Right. What is my story actually about? What is the starting moment? Oh wait, the big thing that starts my story actually happens halfway through my draft. That's way too late for a short story, right? So that's what you can start to see with the outline. So once you've done that, you've dealt with those things that become very obvious when you do this kind of practice. Now it's time to look at your economy of words. So moving from big picture to narrow picture, right? In a short story, every single word, sentence, and moment must contribute to the progress of your main story or theme. Okay? When you are writing a short story, there's no room for the kind of flourishes that are just fun or that are just, you just get carried away with your own poetry, right? That's great while you're writing. That's a normal part of the drafting process. But in the revision process, it's time to rein that back in. And you can't let your emotional attachment to some of the pieces you've written keep you from trimming ruthlessly. I'm going to use a phrase many of you have probably heard about. We're talking about killing your darlings. It's a very violent metaphor. But when we say kill your darlings, right, we're talking about those parts of the story where it might even just be a line of description, right? It might just be a very short piece. Things that you've written that you loved, but that don't actually contribute to your story. Those need to go.
So I love killing other people's darlings. So like when I'm working on like something that Gareth has written, I'm just like, nope, this goes. No. But for mine, I prefer maybe not to kill them, just kind of put them in a bit of a coma, right? So I have a whole file of just those little, in my, of course, own personal opinion, those little strokes of genius, those little like bits that are just so great, and they'll fit somewhere else better. Keep them in a file. You don't have to kill them, just maybe put them in a timeout file or something.
Retire them.
You just
temporarily.
Put them on the injured reserve if you'd like a sports metaphor. But yeah, kill is like if I'm an editor and I only have purple right now, but my red pen out and I'm slashing and killing. And our horror students will love these analogies, but slashing, murdering, killing, absolutely yes. To get it out of the current story, just extract it and put it over on the side, right? Because there will be other opportunities to use those darlings in other works, and just be ruthless, as Ally said, just streamlining this short story, because every word, every phrase, every scene has to earn its place.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. If you're panicking at the very thought of cutting something out, Beth's advice is spot on. There's no reason why you may not be able to use it somewhere else. You never know. So, I know a lot of writers that just sort of keep a running Word document and they just cut and paste and just sort of drop some of these bits that they really, really love into that file. You'll use it for something, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
So how do you recognize them? In order to get them out, you have to recognize them. The key here is really to try and practice objectivity, which is so hard for everyone, right? It's very, very difficult for all of us. It's very hard for the human brain to really be objective about your own creation, right? It's just not how we're built biologically, psychologically, whatever you want it is. And that's why many people will look for outside feedback, for example, from other readers, other writers and critique groups, or from people like me and my team. But you can cultivate your ability to get more objective. You can practice better objectivity as a writer. And one key to that is learning to recognize a particular urge. So as you're reading through, and as you're starting to identify these little bits that are really strong and not so strong, when you find yourself feeling like there's something that you're just trying to make it fit, you're like, oh, this doesn't maybe fit right here, but maybe I can make it fit over here, or maybe if I do this, I can keep it. If you're basically rewriting your story to justify keeping a little piece that you like, if it doesn't fit organically, that's often a red flag. So that's something to pay attention to. It's usually a clue that you have a darling on your hand. So that can be sort of like your first sense of awareness that there's something that you're not being as objective about as you need to be. And then when you find those things, when you have those moments, you just want to ask yourself, does this really need to be here, right? Not is it good? That's not the question. Does it really need to be here? Is it crucial to the reader's understanding? Is this character really necessary? Is this detail really necessary? Is this line of dialogue really necessary, right? Necessary. If the answer boils down to I just like it but don't really need it, then you know what you need to do. It's time to trim it out. It's time to retire that darling. Put them in the penalty box for now.
Can I just say, these comments, for those watching live, kudos to all of you. Zombify your darlings. I can tell we have a lot of horror. Soul trap your darlings. Carbonite your darlings. Some sci-fi fans out
nice.
here. File your darlings and forget about them for 5 years. I mean, whatever works for you. I love, love, love these comments. Whatever analogy works for you, but definitely keeping an eye out for those red flags of trying to force a fit. Oh, this is brilliant. I must keep it. Question everything. Question everything.
That's right. That's right.
Good night, your darlings.
Yeah. So like some of you are having fun with it, and that's great. That's awesome. Yay for energy, guys. But for some of you, this may all sound like the exact opposite of fun. Many writers really struggle with this part of the process. It's actually painful. So as I said earlier, AutoCrit can really help you out here. And Beth, do you want to tell them a little bit more specifically about the demo? You said it was going to be on Thursday.
Yes. So on Thursday, May 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern, we will be broadcasting a live demo where we're going to real-time live edit someone's work. Broadcasting out to YouTube. So right where you're watching us today, there's another placeholder out there already for this show on Thursday, May 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Join us to see AutoCrit in action. Now, if you're already an AutoCrit subscriber to our professional level services online, fantastic. We appreciate and love you so much. If you don't yet have professional level access to AutoCrit, now is the perfect time to take advantage of, we've got a $1 trial, 14 days of the full professional level subscription for just $1. And that will get you through the end of this challenge and a little beyond. So I think my colleague Gareth is out there in the YouTube comments. Gareth, if you would just pop that link out there. Anyone who hasn't taken advantage of that $1, it'll unlock all the power of AutoCrit. Feel free to jump in, play around. It's quite easy to get started. And then you can spend some time in there just kind of seeing what it's all about, and then deep dive in with us on Thursday to see it in action and how you can kind of unlock the potential of your story with AutoCrit.
Awesome. So those are the specific tips that I've prepared for you guys today, but I'm here for as long as Beth wants to run this live stream answering your questions. So why don't we just go to that?
That's definitely. So if anybody has questions for Ally, definitely pop them in the chat. I saw one earlier on, and let me just scroll back through. Let's see. I cannot remember who it was from, but I think it was around for a short story, a nonfiction short story, actually. Is a prologue kind of appropriate or desirable? I know my personal feelings. What about you, Ally?
Well, first of all, I'm curious about, I don't know who that was, but if you want to type into the comments a little bit more, by definition, a short story is fiction. So there really is no such thing as a nonfiction short story. Now, there are short works that can be nonfiction. It might be more appropriately titled an essay, but if you want to describe a little bit more about what you meant by that, maybe I can help you suss that out. But the second part of your question, is a prologue appropriate? No, short stories should not have a prologue. Real simple, guys. Remember we talked about economy of words. Okay, a prologue in a novel can serve a really interesting function. It can sort of be like a little teaser. It can help you to get really excited about something that hasn't happened in the story yet. Or depending on the type of book, for example, a mystery thriller, prologues are often the murder, right? The crime, the thing that happens, and then the story sort of starts with chapter one. So, prologues have a role in a longer work. In a short story, not so much.
Absolutely agree. And remember, the word count max is 5,000 for this challenge. If you had a prologue, which again, we completely recommend against it, prologue for a short story is a little redundant. That's going to count towards your word count. So if you feel like something that's critical enough to include in your work, make that part of the story. And personally, I kind of feel in a lot of cases, even prologues to novels can be that way, but I love a mystery thriller that starts out with the prologue as the murder, and it's quite short, and I can just make that happen. I may be in a haunted office.
Oh, I just saw that too. You said mystery thriller, and the door went.
Yeah. And like, and all of a sudden you're going to see it here live. Fantastic. So, and I know we have a lot of people in the challenge who are writing their short story based on a real event, but it's still going to be like a fictionalized thing. So think about, the idea that short stories can be based on real life events, but they're not prescriptive kind of nonfiction or like how-tos, or it can be almost like an essay, but it's told in more of a narrative form.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a good
My
distinction
assistant
to make.
showed up today.
Oh, that's who was playing with the door. There we go. Your personal assistant. So yeah, just to expand on that a little bit more, and this, this may not matter quite as much for the purposes of this challenge. Beth, you can speak to that as far as what qualifies you for the anthology. But generally speaking, like if you're submitting your stories to publications, for example, right, to journals or places like that, you want to be really careful what you're calling it, because if you're submitting, let's say, a romance story to a place that is only asking for personal essays, right, you're going to get rejected right away. So it's important that you understand what your piece of work is and that you're submitting it to places that actually accept that type of work. First of all, if your story is based on something that really happened, totally okay, right? Even novels, we call them autobiographical novels, fine, but it's still fictionalized. If you are actually telling the story of something that happened and you are not fictionalizing it in any way, you are sort of reporting what happened in a narrative format, the way that Beth said, it's not a short story. It is either an essay or it's a short narrative, and you'll look for those kinds of buzzwords. You should not call it a short story. You'll really confuse other people and yourself.
So if Liz is writing about a trip that occurred a few years ago, is this nonfiction? I think if you're just straight up recounting something that did actually happen and you're not adding fictional narrative aspects to it, then technically it might still be kind of the what did you just call it? An essay or a
personal essay, or travel narrative. I mean, narrative is a good word. Like you'll see what used to be called creative. I think it used to be called like the Journal of Creative Nonfiction was one of the biggest journals. I'm not sure if they're still around, but yeah, it's not a short story. It's not fiction.
So let's see. We have a couple. Oh, Bruce says, may I ask an editing and usage question that's been really bugging me? Yes, Bruce, pop that in the chat while you're doing that. How about we scroll? Let's scroll back. Oh, I got a little behind here. Should your short story pin itself to a specific or narrow time and place? Great question.
Very good question.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's a rule. Certainly not a rule. However, again, because we're dealing with such a short word count, it can be really challenging to start telling a story that moves around a lot in time and or has numerous locations, because every time you do that, you've got sort of a kind of setup that needs to happen. So mostly I would encourage you to stick to a fairly narrow time frame, and your locations should probably be limited from like 1 to 3. You don't want to keep describing setting after setting after setting when you only have 5,000 words. But speaking more broadly, there's nothing wrong with doing that in a story if you're able to make it work within the short word count that you have.
Absolutely agree. And for more on this specific topic, especially around settings, check out the interview we did with Rain Hall last week. We did that on Thursday the 13th. It's available on our YouTube channel as a replay. And she talks a lot about how many different settings you should have and can have, and thinking about compressing that word count. Because as Ally says, this is a hard challenge for a lot of us who typically write longer form, just to stick within that word count and tell an entire story. So thinking of how you narrow time, place, setting, location, etc., to make it efficient but still serve the story, check out our conversation with Rain Hall about that. Let's see. Here's one from J.L. Wallace. What's a good way to write the inciting incident? JL, if you have more context, let us know. My thought is jump in.
Yeah. So even when you're writing in long form, you'll often hear the advice that the inciting incident should happen usually in chapter 1. Somewhere between page 1 and the end of chapter 1 usually is the inciting incident. Of course, in a short story, we don't have the luxury of a chapter 1. We only have the story. Your inciting incident for a short story should be happening within the first few paragraphs, right? And to be clear, for those of you who aren't 100% sure what an inciting incident is, it's the incident that incites the story. So it's the thing that makes the rest of your story happen, right? So it's where your story starts in a substantive way. So it may not be the first word on the page. I don't mean where your story starts in that sense, but it's where the story itself really begins. It's the thing that has to happen, or the rest of the story doesn't happen.
And sometimes you'll hear it also called the call to adventure, call to action, that kind of thing as well. But it is certainly the spark kind of getting underway. So as soon as possible, and as always, as we've mentioned before, succinctly think about brevity, think about word efficiency, and not, it's a balance, right? When you think about word efficiency versus stripping everything out of your story, because you could just say, like, there was a fire and then they rebuilt and reconciled with their family, and like that's the whole story, but that's not super interesting. So balancing the three-dimensional nature of your characters and settings with word efficiency. Oh my goodness, great question from Pierre. The best online source to learn everything about putting commas in all the right places. Are we about to discuss the Oxford comma? Because I have thoughts.
Talk about controversial. You thought Plotters versus Pantsers was controversial. Oof, Oxford comma. To quote Vampire Weekend, band Vampire Weekend, who has an entire song called "Who Gives a" about the Oxford comma. The answer is I do. But besides that, so AutoCrit absolutely does help with grammar and punctuation. But there are also, if you're just looking to learn the rules as opposed to necessarily just editing where suggested commas might happen, one of my favorite sources is Grammar Girl. Minion Forty has been around for a very long time. She has a knack for breaking down complex grammar and punctuation rules. They're not always as straightforward as one might imagine. English is an extremely complicated language, and she has a really wonderful way of explaining how things go in a way that's very humorous and easy to understand, and she uses lots of examples. So just Google Grammar Girl. I don't know if it's grammargirl.com still. I think she sold the site. She's been working under somebody else, but
yeah, I think she is under quickanddirtytips.com.
There you go.
Girl. So let me grab that. And
yeah, that is my favorite resource for all things grammar and punctuation.
So good, yes. Let's see if I can make that a banner. Turn that off, turn that on. Quick and dirty tips.
There you go.
All right. Oh, here is a good one about overall editing and kind of how to work with editors. It's a very common question, and Ally would love your take on. As Ally is an editor, what works for you? How do authors work well with you?
Yeah, so the first thing to understand is really the role of different kinds of editors. You have your developmental editor, who's someone that's going to give you the sort of big picture feedback. That's the person who's going to tell you, hey, I don't think your story's really starting in the right place. There's sort of too much backstory and the opening is really bogged down. Maybe we should start it here. Or, it's not really clear what your story is building to. Like, what's the main climax that's happening here? Like, how do we get a better pattern of conflict and tension that builds to that climax? So those kinds of ideas, that's developmental editing. Someone who's getting into line editing, they might be rewriting a line of dialogue as you're speaking to in the question. That's a line editor. It's not always part of developmental editing. It can sometimes be. And then you have copy editing, which is Minion 40's bailiwick. That's technical editing only. Grammar, punctuation, style, basic issues of clarity and consistency. And proofreading, just so you know, is like copy editing. However, people confuse the two all the time. Proofreading very strictly in the book world occurs on designed and laid out pages, what we call proof pages, right? So they're a little bit different. So all of that said, the editor that you're working with, any good editor, first of all, it should never be a fight because you are the author and it's always up to you ultimately to make that decision. So if you have an editor that is rewriting your book, they're not really an editor anymore. Like they're going above and beyond their role, in my opinion. Sometimes that is reflective of over enthusiasm. Sometimes there's a good intention. Sometimes, frankly, it's somebody who doesn't have the right experience and they don't really understand that that's not what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be helping to guide you as the author to make better decisions about your book. So you shouldn't have to worry about stopping someone from rewriting your book. That's not their job. That's your job.
They're becoming a ghostwriter at that point and their name on it. Yeah, exactly.
So that's the first thing. When you're working with a professional editor, that shouldn't be a concern. They should only be making suggestions. Now, that said, if you have an editor at any stage who is suggesting to you that your character's dialogue that you feel is about simply just being colloquial and they're correcting it for one reason or another, first of all, I would encourage you to listen to that feedback, right? This goes back to what we talked about earlier, this idea of how hard it is to really be objective about your own work. And there's a balance. There's a difference between being able to hear with a little objectivity that something about your work is not quite working and knowing in your heart that you have a certain intent for your work and someone else just, for whatever reason, their suggestion doesn't mesh with that intent and you need to maintain authorial integrity. It's a very fine line between those and you'll get better at it as you become more practiced. But especially in the early stages, when you're a brand new writer, I would encourage you to err on the side of trusting the person you've paid good money to help you make your work better. But if you don't understand why, ask them to explain. Right? If somebody's marking up your dialogue over and over and you're like, I thought I was just being colloquial, and they're like, no, it doesn't make any sense. Whatever it is that they're telling you, we'll say, can you explain to me what it is? I think I'm doing this. What is it that you don't think is working here? What are you trying to get me to do? Because in explaining to you why they're marking up your dialogue, they might be able to better help you understand what they're aiming for. And maybe then you will accept their suggestion, or maybe by better understanding what they're trying to help you accomplish, you'll come up with your own way of addressing that problem that feels better to you, but that still gets the job done.
And as always, sorry, the cat is going nuts. As always, definitely when you're vetting editors, if you are a dog person and your editor is a cat person, ask these important questions up front, because it could be like you want to make sure that your personalities mesh. So good filtering, screening question when you're interviewing editors from Greg there.
Nice, Greg.
I will say also, if your dialogue is colloquial, regional dialects, etc., we often recommend that you reveal that early on and then move to less obvious colloquialisms and regional speech patterns as your story goes on, to have broader appeal and to not fatigue the reader. So maybe that's part of what your editor is thinking. But as Ally says, definitely just ask and see why, because that is going to be the true heart of, they're correcting you or giving you feedback. And if you don't understand why, then you won't understand the impact it could have to your story overall. Let's see. Oh, here's a great one for short stories. Ally, which short story writers do you think are the most influential, and what genre? Boy, I don't read a lot of short stories, so I'm not sure I have a great one. If anybody has some good short story writers they would recommend, drop that in the comments, and let's get Ellen some fodder.
Like Alice Munro is still one of my favorite literary short fiction writers. I'm a big fan of hers. I think if you are working in a literary / slightly commercial mainstream genre of short story, absolutely check out her work. She's one of the best modern writers and masters of the short form, in my opinion. Beyond that, like every genre sort of has its favorites, and then you have a lot of novelists that also write short stories. I'm trying to think. Miranda July. Mostly when I read short stories, they're usually literary fiction, so that's not going to help a lot of you. A really great way to find out what some of the best short stories are to look at these sort of roundups that come out every year. So there's like the Best American Short Story Awards, for example. Mm-hmm. They publish an anthology every year, and they've started to create some that are genre specific. So I think there's like the Best American Short Story, and then there's like the Best American Mystery Story. I think there's the Best American Romance. So they've started to make like a few subcategories of that anthology every year. The Science Fiction Writers of America also has an anthology series that are sort of like classic short story writers, so not necessarily modern, but people who have really significantly influenced science fiction and fantasy in different ways. It's one of the collections I've been working my way through right now. What's really cool about that particular series of anthologies is for each one of the writers they've selected, they tell you a little bit about that person's work and why that person is considered so influential, like what about that person's style contributed to the genre. So that's kind of neat for perspective.
Oh, that's lovely. The Best American series is, I think, what Ally's referring to, and they've got tons of anthologies they publish each year. Best essays, best mystery, Best American short stories. So absolutely check that out. You can find that on Amazon. Let's take a couple more questions. I love this one from Jeanette because it really kind of hits home with me as well. The longer you write and edit, does the time between the emotional reaction to edits and getting the work done get shorter? It's a long process to react to my first novel edits. And Jeanette, I feel this definitely. For me, it is about building that thick skin, even when it's my own editing that's hurting my own feelings, and that's a little weird, and I acknowledge that. But seeing where my patterns can be improved, and my filler words can be limited, and my adjectives can be sliced out, that does get easier and faster over time. Because as you work at that and recognize those patterns, I call it sneaky learning. So some sneaky learning, especially if you're using a tool like AutoCrit, can occur, and your habits will shift and change. So your drafts will be improved, and then it'll be a shorter time to do those edits because those problems, have kind of vanished, I'm going to say, because your habits are improving. So what do you think, Ally?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer, Beth. I think it's like so many things with writing or any craft, it's practice. It's when something bad happens and then you get back up and everything's okay, you sort of train your body's physiological response system, which is really what we're talking about, right? Like that feeling you get when somebody says, this didn't really make sense, or I didn't really love this character. Like, honestly, this ending was kind of lame. Like when people say things like that about your work and you start to get that feeling like your whole face starts to get really hot, your heart starts beating.
Here and it's just red all the way up.
Right. You get a little sweaty, your heart, breathing heavy. That is a physiological stress response. It is no different from the stress response you get when your boss says, hey, we need to have a conversation, or, someone cuts you off in traffic, or going all the way back to the dawn of time, the saber-toothed tiger is chasing you and wants to eat you for dinner, right? Your brain doesn't know the difference.
Stress response.
It's a stress response. If you've read anything about health and wellness in the stress category, or self-help in the stress category, your brain does not know the difference between the saber-toothed tiger and the well-meaning person in your critique group who said they didn't love your villain, right? It's still a stress response. And one of the best ways to get better at dealing with that stress response is simply by exposure. That every time you read some feedback and you don't die, you get a little bit better at dealing with it. That said, Jeanette, I will tell you, I hope this makes you feel a little bit better. As I said, I've been in this business more than 20 years. I've been a professional ghostwriter. I've been a professional book doctor. I'm a professional writer. Even when I have gotten feedback from editors, the initial response is always emotional. And I know all the things, right? Like my brain is very, very well trained to understand that this is the process. And you still have an emotional reaction. You still have to take a deep breath. I walk away. I go cuss the person out in the shower, and you come back and you just know, like, this isn't personal. They're probably right. They're trying to help me make it better. You do whatever you have to do to be able to come back to it with a clear head and a calmer body, so that you can actually hear what they're trying to say and make those intelligent decisions about what really is valuable and something you're going to take action on, and what perhaps doesn't quite land.
Exactly. And I think this also goes back to, trusting, for example, if it's your editor who's giving you this feedback, the trust and the relationship, and knowing the source and trusting the source to know that they're trying to help you get better, and that they are an advisor that you do trust. There's a phrase out there that I can't remember verbatim, but it's something like, never accept criticism from somebody you wouldn't accept. Just if it's a random troll on the internet who says, like, this story was terrible, then be like, okay, people gonna people. So especially on the internet. So thinking about the source of where that quote unquote feedback is coming from can definitely help kind of put you in that mindset. It was like, if it's somebody I don't know who's never written anything, just it's somebody on the internet who's just using that shield to say mean things, then people gonna people, and just I work on letting that stuff go. We've got about 5 minutes left, and we have a terrific question from Cheryl that I think would be great to wrap up our live stream with Ally today, because it is, how do you know when you're done? It's such a great question. Ally, do you want to tackle this one?
Yes, absolutely. Excellent question. I probably get this question 9 times out of every 10 times I go to a writer's conference and I speak to people. So as you are changing, one of the things you should keep in mind is that there's a difference between tweaking and revising, right? When we say revising, we're talking about digging into the details of your story. We're talking about moving scenes around, adding transitions, creating moments, maybe creating characters, right? Really changing things. Fiddling with a comma and a period and a word here and a word there, that's futzing. That's tweaking, which can absolutely improve your work. The thing is, if you're just futzing and you're not doing the substantive revisions, you're not really improving your story. You can have something that's very well written on a line level that still doesn't work as a story, right? And conversely, you can have something that where the details of the story are working, but the writing itself isn't so good. So for a really great story, any piece of writing really, you need to have both of those things working at the same time. So my first piece of advice is focus on the big stuff first. Don't let yourself get distracted. Big rocks. Don't get distracted by the commas and the punctuation and the word choice and the colors and deal with the big things first. Then go through and polish at the line level. And one of the signs that you're done or that you're near to done is when you're just futzing. You can change words forever, right? You can continue to change this character's name and change how you describe the sunset and this and that. When you find that you're just futzing and you're not making any kind of substantive changes anymore, you're either done or you're close to done. Right? That's the kind of futzing where you're no longer improving things. And in fact, if you keep doing it, you will probably break things. So it's actually, really good to notice that when you're mired in that kind of futzing, that kind of tweaking, if you haven't gotten any kind of objective read yet, that's the point to do it. When we work with clients, we always tell people, make it as good as you possibly can on your own before you send it to us. Like, take it as far as you can. That's when it's time to get that objective feedback. Maybe that's your writing partner, maybe that's AutoCrit, maybe that's a critique group, or maybe it's a professional freelance editor that you've hired.
And I completely agree with Ally. I am calling to mind a horror story, an actual story about an author who is tweaking one word over and over and over in this one description. And that's just the micro, like zoomed in. And it ultimately, because it's a horror story, it drives him insane and terrible things happen.
Oh my
So
God.
think about so right before you get to that part, right before you get there, I think Ally is spot on. If you're working in AutoCrit, and as a reminder, we're going to do that demo on Thursday, May 20th at 1 p.m. But if you're working in AutoCrit and you do those reports across the top, those tabs from left to right, then it kind of follows what Ally is saying. The big rocks, those big structural things are going to be on those left-hand tabs. And then as you work your way to the right, they'll get more and more and more fine-grained, right? So we talk about the big rocks, then you put in the pebbles, then you fill in the sand around it, and then you're in the water, right? The water is just filling things up. If you're playing in the water too much and you're like, oh, should I use this comma here? Oh, I've gone through the filler words report. Let me just go through it 3 more times. No. If you've gone through the filler words report and you feel the urge to keep going through it, then you are where Ally said, you're in futzing, and that's a great sign that your story is polished and ready to go to beta readers or to human editors or to self-publishing, I'd say, if you're going the self-publishing route. So it's hard. It's a bit of an art instead of a science. I like to use that the AutoCrit tabs across the top to help keep me on track. And if I'm digging in way too many times on the things like the filler words and things like that, then yeah, great sign that you are nearly ready. And such good advice from Larry. If I have a word that I keep switching back and forth, you might need a completely different or better word. I often have to pick up a completely different word when I can't spell the word that I'm thinking of. So I feel that, Larry, on a very, like a cellular level, I feel that. So, well, thank you everyone for joining us live today with Ally Machate of the Writers Ally, talking about moving into the editing phase of your short story. Now, again, I just loved how we started our time together today. If you're sitting today with your story that feels like just a pile of words, do not worry. It's perfectly normal. Everyone has been there. Every author has been there, and you're right on track. So thank you, Ally, and thank you, Magellan, making his appearance there. And
Finally
Lewis,
decided to join us.
My so everyone, be sure to join us again on. Before I say join us again on Thursday, let me just have a look. We have more coming up for you even before then. Every day this week through Friday, we are going live at 1:00 Eastern. Tomorrow, we have author Jay Thorne. I think his podcast is called Writers Inc. Join us live tomorrow to talk with Jay Thorne, who really understands the challenge you have accepted with this community writing challenge, because Jay has challenged himself to write a short story every week for the year 2021. We'll get his tips on how he's doing with that and how to remain accountable and motivated and digging into the editing and creating on a very short time frame. We'll do that tomorrow. Real quick on Goodreads, Ally, you are just Ally Machate?
I think it's actually Allison, Alllyson Machate.
All right. So have a look for Ally under Alllyson Machate, Machate, on Goodreads, and you can find out all the books that she has in her reading pile. Thank you, Ally. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys for having me. It's always fun.
Absolutely. See everyone soon. Bye.
Good luck.